No, you didn't click the wrong video. Olive is taking a well-deserved vacation, but don't worry, she'll be back before you can say Samsung Galaxy Note 10.1 2014 edition LTE. Now, you guys definitely saw this one coming. With the launch of Samsung's S26 Ultra, we knew it was time to join our S25, S24, and S23 Ultras and put their cameras to the test, as we did last year. Minor hardware upgrades, but huge software changes? Seems like it's indeed the case. Hey, I'm Essie, your scriptwriter here at Versus.com, and don't forget you can join the crew by hitting that join button below for exclusive videos and perks. Here's a shout out to Alperen, Harris, Gustav, and Mark for becoming our newest Ultra members. In our camera comparisons, we award points based on the number of devices in the mix. Since we have 4 Galaxies today, the maximum score for any given category is 4. Also, we always evaluate all our photos and videos using a calibrated monitor. Let's kick things off with the main camera, since these are very probably the ones you'll be using the most. We've got the classic 200 megapixel setup across all 4 Galaxies, but the new S26 Ultra sports an improved f1.4 aperture. That said, the sensor itself remains identical in all 4. What jumped out at us immediately is that the S26 is definitely chasing that warmer white balance you usually see on an iPhone. Like we always say, it's easy on the eyes, but isn't exactly true to life. The S25, S24, and S23 Ultras lean into a more realistic tones, though the S23 is a bit more contrasty and saturated for our liking. Indoors, the S25 is the only one that nails the colors, but then in the very next shot, the S26 and S24 look exactly like it. Overall, they're all solid, but you should expect warmer vibes on the S26, slightly lifted shadows on the S24, and heavy contrast on the S23. Now let's switch lenses and look at the bigger picture. It's time for some ultra-wide shots. In this department, we got 50 megapixel shooters on the S26 and S25 Ultra, while the S24 and S23 Ultra stick with 12 megapixels. The field of view is exactly the same in all 4, but the sensor size did get a nice little bump on the 2 newest models. Image-wise, we're seeing that boosted saturation on the S23 Ultra again. This time around though, every model except the S24 pushes the contrast high enough to crush the shadows. Look, there's nothing wrong with letting shadows be shadows, but the S24 is the only one capturing them realistically here. Indoors, we caught the S26 Ultra aggressively boosting specific red, orange, and yellow tones. It's also heavy lifting shadows, which you can really see on my face in this shot. Now, I'm sure you know the Galaxy Ultras come with 2 separate zoom lenses, so let's take a look at them. First up, we got the 10 megapixel telephoto lenses with 3 times optical zoom on all 4. Aperture is equal on all 4, but interestingly, Samsung shrunk the sensor size on the S26 Ultra this year. Moving to the second telephoto, we're looking at 50 megapixels with 5 times optical zoom on the S26, S25, and S24, while the S23 is the outlier with its 10 megapixel 10 times optical zoom lens. Samsung did give the S26 a wider aperture, though the sensor size is a carryover from the S25 and S24. This new module uses an all lenses on prism design, rather than the periscope telephoto of previous years, which keeps the camera module more compact. In practice, the 3 times lenses all deliver pretty similar detail, though the S26 nails the color rendition, with the S23 coming in a close second. Once we push to 5 times zoom, the S26 takes the lead on detail, even though the S24 and S23 are also using optical zoom at this range. At 10 times, the S23 switches to its second optical lens, but since it's only 10 megapixels, detail looks almost identical across all 4 Ultras. Once you hit 20 times digital zoom, the post-processing becomes evident on all of them. If you go all the way to 100 times zoom, the S23 actually pulls ahead in raw detail, but it doesn't handle highlights quite as well as the newer 3. So the S26 feels the most balanced here. The other 3 are still great, but they tend to struggle with wonky white balance, oversaturation, or highlights that are just a bit too bright. But this comparison is far from over. It's time to see which one of these Ultras takes the best portrait shots. Using the main cameras, you'll notice the S26 and S25 are much more precise when it comes to separating single hair strands from the background. But we have to pause on this shot for a second. Interestingly, the S25 and S24 blurs out my elbow, which is closer to the lens, mimicking how a professional camera will behave. Meanwhile, the S26 and S23 keep everything sharp, which looks kinda artificial. All 4 can shoot portraits using the 3 times telephoto lenses. Results are pretty consistent across the board, aside from those characteristic looks we talked about earlier. However, the S23 Ultra is the only one that can't use its second telephoto lens for portraits, which puts it at a disadvantage compared to the newer models. Now let's channel our inner Steven Spielberg and get the cameras rolling. For maximum resolution, the main cameras on all of these can shoot at 8K at 30 FPS, perfect for watching back on your 8K Samsung TV. But as usual, all the clips you will see here were shot at 4K 30 FPS. That warmer color temperature we saw in the photos is here to stay, as it carries right over into video. Again, it looks great, but the actual scene was a bit cooler, which the other three captured more accurately. Oddly enough, the S24's stabilization felt a little shaky compared to the rest, as the S23 looks a bit over-sharpened. Indoors, they all look pretty much identical, with the S23 being just a hair brighter, the difference is not a deal breaker. You've also got portrait video on the main sensor, maxing out at 4K 30 FPS. They all look very similar here, but the S26 and S25 have much more precise depth detection. Still, they all fail at blurring the empty space between my arms. And once again, the S23 makes my skin tone look a bit too pale. Switching over to the ultra-wide, we've got a max resolution of 8K 30 FPS on the S26 and S25, while the S24 and S23 cap out at 4K 60 FPS. Apparently the cameras on the S23 Ultra aren't on speaking terms, because in this outdoor shot, the video looks way darker than what we saw on its main sensor. The other three are much more consistent, though indoors, the S26 still leans into those warmer tones, but the difference with the S25 and S24 is not huge. Also, they all manage the broad dynamic range quite well, so the S26 and S25 are definitely your best bets here. Just keep in mind the S26 adds a little global warming to your footage. But we briefly mentioned stabilization, so let's take a closer look at it. Check out the Galaxy S26 Ultra video here. You can see the lens bouncing a bit as we skip on and off this bench. It's pretty strange because the other three don't show this effect at all, not even the S24, which we already saw it was a bit shaky earlier. However, once you go from walking to a full-on sprint, all four perform great and are basically neck and neck. This is with super steady turn on. Just a heads up, overall video quality does take a slight hit when you film in this mode. As you might know, the S26 Ultra introduces a third option called Horizon Lock. It keeps the horizon perfectly level even if the phone tilts sideways, and honestly, it's not bad at all. It definitely helps make up for that weird lens jitter we saw a second ago. Next, let's flip things around and see which one has the best front camera. Hardware-wise, there's zero difference between these four. They all feature the same 12-megapixel sensor with the exact same aperture. That said, it's nice to see Samsung gradually dial back the over-sharpening with every new generation. The S23 photos, however, have a noticeable green tint that they fixed starting with the S24. Interestingly, in low light, that extra sharpening on the S24 actually works in its favor, pulling out a bit more detail. For video, all four can handle 4K at 60 FPS, and oh boy, things get interesting here. First off, the S26 looks a bit flat, and while the other three look fine at first, wait a second and you'll see them all freak out like vampires the moment the clouds move. And now we're gonna test the audio on all of these four Galaxies. We're gonna start with the newest one, of course, the Galaxy S26 Ultra. How is my voice on it? Is it good? Then we're gonna move on to the 25. Shouldn't be like a big difference, but we'll talk about it in a second. Then is the 24. It's a little bit older now, but how is the audio? Still holding up? And finally, let's go to the S23 Ultra. Is it still holding up like nowadays? Do you think the audio is great? Let's talk about it right now. Did you see that? They all ended up super blown out. Plus, the S25 and S24 suddenly dropped the exposure with no smooth transition at all. As for the audio, they all sound extremely similar. The only odd one is the S23, which sounds a tiny bit muffled compared to the newer models. And now let's become masters of time and check out some slow motion footage. For this mode, we always start testing the max resolution available. On the three most recent models, we got 4K at 120 FPS, while the S23 is capped at 1080p and 240 FPS. Even though the S24 can also hit 4K, the S26 and S25 look noticeable better here. When it comes to the maximum frame rate, they all top out at 240 FPS. At that speed, they all drop down to 1080p, putting them on the same playing field as the S23. Once again though, the two newer models definitely look sharper. If you have an S23 Ultra, you know it does have a super slow-mo mode, but this is limited to only a few seconds of recording. It also just interpolates frames, so isn't true 960 FPS video. Moving on, it's time to get up close and personal and take a peek into the miniature world. At very short distance, you'll notice the S24 and S23 hold onto a bit more sharpness, whereas the two newer models tend to dial it down. But to be fair, all four are still great, it really just comes down to your personal preference. However, when you switch over to the 3x telephoto for macro zoom, the S23 gives you natural bokeh, but you lose some fine detail because the exposure is a bit high. The S26 and S25 manage the exposure better, but the details can look a little artificially enhanced. For us, the S24 is the sweet spot here. Up next, let's step into the darkness and wrap things up with some low light shots and videos. Photos from the main camera look a bit too bright on the S23 and a little crispy on the S24. The S25 nails the colors, but the S26 takes the win for shadow detail. In ultra-wide shots, quality takes a hit across all four. Again, the S25 has the most accurate colors, even if they seem a little bit saturated. Also, every single one makes the scene look like daytime, despite the exact same illumination as the previous shot. For portraits, the S26 Ultra is the only one that managed to correctly blur the background through the lenses of my glasses, without getting confused. When it comes to the deeper zooming lenses, the S26 isn't perfect by any means, but it captures the best overall scene. No weird blur, funky colors, or pitch black patches. Unlike the photos, the main camera video is incredibly similar across the board. You lose a little quality in the dark, but they all look great. Though, if we're being nitpicky, the S26 has a slightly less banding and noise. It's the same story for the ultra-wide video. They're almost identical, but again, if we're being super picky, the S26 just looks a bit sharper and cleaner overall. So when you factor in every low light photo and video, the S26 conquers this category thanks to what Samsung calls nightography. And that's it! Now it's time to see who takes the crown. Our system weights categories by importance, so the final scores aren't just a simple tally. The main sensors, ultra-wide and video carry the most weight, while zoom, slow-mo and macro are just a bit further down the list. Breaking it down by category, the S25 Ultra shined with its main camera, while the S24 Ultra actually surprised us with its ultra-wide performance. Zoom was a decisive win for the S26, but the S25 managed to reclaim the top spot for portraits and video. All four were neck and neck for stabilization, and when it came to the front camera and audio, the S26, S25 and S24 were basically tied. Slow motion was a dead hit between the S26 and S25, while the S24 took the lead in macro. Finally, for low light performance, the S26 was clearly the most reliable of the bunch. So, after crunching the numbers, coming in last place we have the Galaxy S23 Ultra. Still holds up well nowadays, but you could really see how much it loves to brighten up scenes and crank up the saturation to 11. In third place, we have the Galaxy S24 Ultra. This was a turning point for Samsung, moving away from social media ready photos into a much more natural and human look. That means, in first place, we have the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. This was honestly a huge surprise, but it just goes to show how a full year of software refinement can really polish a phone. Most of its shots and videos look the most balanced and true to life. The S26 Ultra landed in second place, but it was incredibly close. It clearly has the best hardware, but since it's still very new, it might need a few upgrades to really shine. If you're as surprised by those results as we are, let us know in the comments. And of course, you can find links to all of these Ultra Galaxies in the description below. If you wanna see how this brand new Galaxy S26 Ultra stacks up against the iPhone 17 Pro Max and the Pixel 10 Pro XL, click that link magically appearing in the corner right now. And before you dismiss another notification, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up and hit subscribe, as we're always testing new devices to help you make the best choice. We'll see you in our next video, and until then, take care.